Bart, welcome to the Where the Climate Things Are podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me.
So great to have you. I am really excited to connect with you and very grateful to Brennan, who is a mutual contact of ours, who shout out Brennan, who came to every event that we held during NYC Climate Week. So Brennan, you're amazing. First of all, before I even jump in with intros, where are you calling from? Are you in Montana?
Missoula, Montana.
Missoula, hell yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, if you would not mind, Bart, can you please introduce yourself to the audience in whatever way you want to take that today?
Yeah, happy to do so. So Bart Mihailovich, and as we just talked about, live in Missoula, Montana. I work for Waterkeeper Alliance. And Waterkeeper Alliance, I work remotely. It's based in New York. It's a global organization. I'm the director of our Waterkeeper membership services team at Waterkeeper Alliance, and we'll get into a lot more about what Waterkeeper Alliance does and what that role looks like. But I've been on Waterkeeper Alliance staff since 2014. Prior to joining staff, I was a waterkeeper. So I was living in Spokane, Washington for a while. Went to school, Eastern Washington, stuck around in the area. I'm happy to get into that too. And then kind of found my way into this role as Spokane Riverkeeper, which is kind of what, that's how I got to know what kind of the larger Waterkeeper Alliance sort of ecosystem looked like. So I spent 4 years as the Spokane Riverkeeper, just focused on Spokane River issues and the local community, local areas. And then had this opportunity in 2014 to join the staff at Waterkeeper Alliance and kind of take what I knew about the model and how it works and take that larger. And so I've been on staff for 11 years now. I've had, like 6 or 7 different titles as I've kind of changed, but always been in the same kind of role or same area at Waterkeeper, which is working directly with our Waterkeeper groups who are on the ground. And so there are 300 Waterkeeper groups globally in 47 countries. Each of the Waterkeeper groups are their own autonomous, independent organizations, place-based in a watershed in a community. These individual people running these organizations who, are responsive and reactive to the needs of the community and the watershed that they protect and that they work on. And Waterkeeper Alliance, works to support all of those groups, bring them all together. We train them, we connect them, we defend their right to speak out, help them build strong, sustainable organizations. But I mean, these are people on the ground, every day. They're doing the monitoring, the litigating, the restoring the habitat, challenging polluters, all that stuff. And Waterkeeper Alliance works to bring them all together and help strengthen them and move together as a huge unit.
Wow. I did not know the span of 47 countries, like the international nature of that is pretty incredible. I had no idea.
That's really cool. Yeah, and that's how I met Brennan. So Brennan Smoor, who's with Atchafalaya Basin Keeper in Louisiana, which I did practice. Even though I've known that group for 15 years, I still have to practice how to say Atchafalaya. So I hope I got it
Fair
right.
enough.
But yeah, so all of these, that's how I know Brennan, and that's how Waterkeeper or the Waterkeeper groups. It started as in the U.S. There were a few, I won't go into the whole history, but a few groups who were kind of doing similar things on water issues around the country and said, we ought to get together and be more connected, learn from each other, teach each other best practices. And, that was, from then to now where we're at. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing about Waterkeeper Alliance is all of these groups are each other's peers and teachers and mentors, and they're just sharing how to do it. It may be different, like obviously in different cities and countries and cultures and whatever. Like it's always going to be a different approach or different type of pollution or a different issue, but just generally like that strength from one another, and they're all connected through the Waterkeeper Alliance.
That's so cool. And before we move on from this, I know we'll get kind of more in the nitty gritty, but Basin Keeper, River Keeper, Waterkeeper. It sounds like Waterkeeper is kind of the overarching, but yeah, can you talk about the differences there?
Yeah, I can. So yes, anyone sort of in that family of names is all, part of what makes the alliance, what makes Waterkeeper Alliance. But it was founded by the original group was just called Riverkeeper, and they were based in New York on the Hudson River. So Hudson Riverkeeper, that was the first group. As people started to kind of see that and, kind of know about what was going on, other groups started popping up. The Chattahoochee Riverkeeper in Atlanta, Puget Sound Keeper in Seattle. And so, Sound Keeper, Riverkeeper, Waterkeeper, Creek Keeper, Basin Keeper. I mean, you kind of all using this. And when Waterkeeper Alliance really formalized, it was like, all right, well, let's kind of keep it within that family of names. The idea being that, just that kind of that term, that shorthand keeper, people would see that, understand like what it was. And that's what the Alliance, one of the roles we play is to kind of put some quality criteria around what the groups do. Again, like I said, they're
Yeah.
all autonomous. We don't direct their operations or what they're doing in their local communities, but if we have some general guardrails around what that looks like, with the idea being that if anybody sees the name Basin Keeper, River Keeper, Sound Keeper, they have some kind of idea of
Yeah.
what that is, because we have some consistency built into how we kind of keep those groups licensed.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I've actually wanted to ask that question for a while in my life of knowing kind of about these groups. So, and I believe I'm going to be able to be talking to, I think it's Sean from Soundkeeper, maybe, or one of the groups up in Seattle
Yes,
area where
yes.
I'm based. So,
Sean Dixon, or he's a wonderful
yeah, also
he's a
a Brennan,
soundkeeper.
also a Brennan contact. So
Great,
thanks to him
right.
for spreading the love of the podcast. But that's interesting. It's interesting how, like, the real thread here is, like, I guess the word keeper is kind of that branding throughout versus like the first word, the first word's kind of changing throughout based on where it is or what kind of watershed or, waterway is being kept or is being protected. So that's
Yeah.
cool. I didn't actually know the formal ties between that, or the, I don't know if formal is the right word, but kind of like that, the
But
connections there. That's really
yeah,
interesting.
it's
Yeah.
formal, and
It's
I use
pretty
this
formal.
analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I use this analogy sometimes. It's kind of a little bit like a fast food restaurant franchising situation where, like, we are
Interesting.
Waterkeeper Alliance. All of our groups around the world are licensed by Waterkeeper Alliance to use that name, whether, the mark name, whether it be Soundkeeper, Riverkeeper, Waterkeeper, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And so that's where that consistency comes from. Like, we'll license like, not anybody can just go out there and say, I'm the whatever Waterkeeper. Like, they go through a formal review and approval process with Waterkeeper Alliance. So we can have an idea, because we want groups and people doing this work that, are strong, effective, and many of the things, but, effective groups. Because if one group,
Hmm.
all boats rise with the tides, right? So, like, we want if one group is not doing a good enough job, or what have you, like, that
Yeah,
affects the brand overall and affects all the groups. So
totally. Which is a
yeah.
lot I know you said it was sort of a light touch, or maybe not like as in depth with how to run certain things, but I mean, with 300 or however many groups you just said, that's a lot. That's a lot to, like, keep tabs on the network and make sure the groups are at least giving kind of a positive name
Hmm.
to this work. So that's a
Yeah.
challenge for sure. I'm sure we'll get into more of that. I was wondering, this is a question I ask everybody on the podcast and sort of start the podcast this way. If you would talk about your aha moment on climate in whatever way you want to take that, but what kind of was that moment for you that woke you up to, or in climate or environment? I was curious to ask you that question.
Yeah. I'm excited to answer the question.
Okay,
Mine's really cliche, and I'm a storyteller, and I'm gonna wind my way
let's
back to
go.
it. But this is it. Like, it was seeing the trailer for An Inconvenient Truth in 2005.
Yeah.
But here's kind of like, I grew up in Montana. I talked about my time in Spokane, but I'm a Montana native. I grew up in Montana. I grew up
Yep.
in Butte, Montana.
Cool.
Grew up in the 80s and 90s. Like, the outdoors, kind of being outside. It wasn't just like something you, like, kind of visited. It was pretty much just like life, right? Like, that was just sort of the backdrop to everything we did. It was the
Totally.
floating on the rivers, the fishing, the hunting, the hiking, the skiing, kind of just everything outside. And so I have this, like, upbringing of, this kind of familial cultural upbringing where, kind of my family was, it was kind of like pretty progressive, kind of hippie-ish in the way that, like, you kind of just, you have what you have. You don't need more than what you have. You don't, like, waste anything, sort of reuse things. So all these sort of,
Yeah.
like, stuff was just sort of like, that was kind of just what it was. I really didn't even have, like, a term, or, like, I probably knew, but didn't really think about, like, the term environmentalist or conservation or what that was. It was just sort of like, that's kind of what it was. And so then I was in college, and around that time when that trailer came out, like, I graduated with a journalism degree. So
Okay.
journalism major. I'm going through journalism school, and I'm kind of, like, interested in, I suppose, like, traditional journalism, like news writing. and so I was interested in blogs, and it was 2005, so like there wasn't a ton of blogs like there is now, but there was like I
Mm-hmm.
knew what I knew if I like wanted to follow like a niche topic, like I don't know, music or sports or whatever, like you find a blog that suits your interest and you kind of find that. So I was onto some environmental blogs, kind of interested in it, and there was this one blog, and I wish I could remember the name. It was based in Seattle actually,
Huh.
and I ended up like meeting the two women who started it. They had this blog that talk about like cool environmental stuff, and they posted the trailer for An Inconvenient Truth. I was like, oh yeah. At that time, it was like this weird light bulb, or not even weird, just like this light bulb of like all these things
Yeah.
that I sort of knew about, but didn't really know how to put the words to it. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
just like hit where I was like, oh yeah, like river flows and like glaciers disappearing and recycling and like all these things that sort of like were just cooked into my DNA already. I finally had like something to talk about. So then I like immediately became really annoying, and I was that person. And I was like sending my family like these really long prose emails about like how they need to do better, and like, did you know that we always went on the rivers as kid when we were younger, but like the river flows are declining, and like all these things. I just constantly was like bombarding them with
Yeah.
like this annoying stuff. But I actually had an outlet for it, which was I was a writer. I was going to journalism
Yeah.
school, so I started writing. Like I could actually
Hmm.
put like ideas and like make connections in my mind to like what I was thinking or seeing. And I started to become aware, as everyone in college, hopefully everyone in college does, is just like way more aware, you're like more tuned into things. I was paying attention more to like the local coverage of things, like the local environmental scene, like what's happening with the rivers in Spokane. I don't know anything about it. Like they were there, but
Yeah.
I didn't really care or think much about it. But um, I really kind of started to sort of like connect all of this. And so it was that trailer. And because I had this
Hmm.
outlet of I can write, and I had a partner in school in journalism school. He and I did a lot of projects together, and it's kind of just like buddied up on things. He wanted to stick around the Spokane area. He was from Western Washington. He's like, I kind of want to stay here, but shoot, what are we going to do? Like journalism degrees even then weren't super
Yeah.
useful.
Yep.
Certainly not now. And so we started kicking ideas around. Like we knew about blogs, and we said, well, there's really no one covering environmental. Well, first of all, we said music because we both love music. Like, let's do a music
Sure.
blog for
Nice.
Spokane. Oh
Hell
yeah,
yeah.
there's like six of those, so we don't
There's
need to
yeah.
do
I'm
that.
sure. I'm sure.
And then we actually we had as a project in journalism school, we did the local newspaper, the Spokesman Review, was like, we're gonna test out this blog thing. Like, what are these all about? So they picked us, or we picked. I don't know how it happened, but they gave us a blog space on the Spokesman Review website to cover a local college basketball team, and we had logins to the back end of like the WordPress to write, and like
Yeah.
with no oversight. We're like, we could write anything. So
You could literally put anything on there.
so,
Yeah.
we're dropping like Seinfeld references and all these like
Oh my
stupid
gosh.
memes and like links
Yes.
to like YouTube video, just like dumb stuff. But we're
That's
all like, but
amazing.
we just like, it was this freedom of like to write about anything. So when we started pitching this, like, okay, what are we going to do? Both want to stay. Clearly this blog thing's going to take off. We're going to be millionaires if we do blogging. And so we went back to the Spokesman Review and we're like, yeah, we'd like to start a blog about environmental issues locally. And I'm like, yeah, great, do it. I mean, it was
Wow.
like a contract situation. We weren't employed, I think we were paid like contractually just to like as we produce stuff, but we had this freedom to just write about the environmental issues of Spokane, and it was everything. Like you could then
Wow.
connect all these things I was thinking about, that knew about from like growing up about the outdoors and nature, and just write about it. And we did
Yeah.
that. We did the blog. We turned the blog into a full website, then a radio show, then a podcast, and we just sort of ran with
What?
it forever. And like that got me into all the things that I do now. But so I
Whoa.
use my degree in essence, right? But like
Yeah,
to
you
get to
did.
where I'm at, but it wasn't intentional at the time. It was just like, oh, this is an opportunity. But to bring it all back, yeah, I think just like that growing up in Montana, like that way, and like just knowing the importance of nature and the outdoors, and then having that voice come across that movie trailer. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I bet other people have you interviewed won't admit it, but An Inconvenient Truth
I
trailer
think
was
definitely
my
for
moment.
the trailer specifically. No, and I think a lot of people's I'm trying to think back to like various answers. I honestly get a lot of different answers on the podcast, which is cool. But that was one for me. I mean, definitely. I feel like there's like people in my life who would probably point to that film specifically and say like, this is when, we started hearing about it. The thing that's interesting, well, first of all, that's so cool that you also were like a very early podcaster. We
Yeah.
we have to acknowledge that. Like, that's awesome. That's so cool that you had that back then. To me, it's also interesting how like it's like, yeah, you might not have thought that maybe there's like a journalism degree and maybe you're not like necessarily knowing that you're going to go use it, but then the passion that you had for communicating about this topic or about these kind of these themes like is clear. I feel like that's another thing too where I'm like, people are like, oh, did you want to do podcasting? I was like, no, I had no idea what like this even was, but I was really passionate about telling stories related to the outdoors and nature and climate. And that, as you know, is sort of what the focus of this podcast is, which is really cool to hear you talk about your childhood and like growing up in Montana, because same with me, I grew up in Maine and it was like a part of what we did. And I wouldn't even say we were like a super outdoorsy family per se, like in comparison to other families in Maine, maybe. Like I threw a full fit the first time my parents tried to take me camping and they like didn't try again for a while because it was like so taxing for them. It really, really took its toll. But now I love camping. Like it's just kind of, it's just, I don't know. It's just the access piece, I think, wasn't something that I was, as you said it really well, was just kind of a part of life. Like it was kind of embedded in everything. And I really appreciate that outdoor recreation and being in nature, being outside. So, okay. So you're in Spokane. I want to connect this dot then to like your then job with Riverkeeper there, I believe. So did you like, what was the shift? How did you get connected with the organization? And like, were you still doing the blog and the kind of the media around what you were communicating with your friend? Or was it like you switched over more suddenly? You're like, oh, I got this job, I got to stop all that. How'd that work?
All of that. And there was like some phasing in and out of things, some strategic, some not strategic at all. Kind of a mess. Some worked, but it all worked out. But so I was, one of the things we did on our blog and on the radio show, because our radio show was at this local community radio station called KYRS, so community radio. And the radio station was in this building in downtown Spokane, still is, that's called the Community Building. And it's like house all these awesome nonprofits that work on environmental, social justice, all these cool issues. And one of the things we really wanted to do with the blog and the radio show was to put a spotlight onto all these amazing organizations in the community and the people doing that. And also, it was really easy, kind of a cheat code, because we could then go to that building, go up and down the directory and be like, so-and-so from this organization, you're already here, like pop in and talk for 20 minutes.
Cool.
But it was really cool to be able to highlight the groups and the people doing all this awesome work. Not that they weren't getting that they want it or need it, but like they're also like traditional media, like the newspaper or the alt weekly, even, they're not always covering like all of those types of issues.
Yeah.
And so two things that like are important to kind of tie together is one of the earlier kind of issues that we were tracking on the blog and the radio show was there was a proposal to do a man-made feature in the river that would create a wave for kayakers to surf on the river, which is done in like lots of places and done well. And there's, if done well, it's great. And as a sort of a recreationist, I was like, oh, cool. Like a surf wave on the river. Like that's awesome. And then as an environmentalist, so I started hearing from like the kayak folks. They're like, this is great. Like, can you talk about this? There's going to be public comment. And then some of the environmental groups were like, yeah, but if you put this structure in the river, it could interfere with the trout, the trout habitat and where they do some of the rearing and all that stuff takes place. So there's like interesting dichotomy of like two groups who are usually always aligned on things like river focused. All of a sudden there's a little bit of a shift or like a schism there. So I was really kind of interested in that.
Interesting.
And then there was a guy that we knew who came to us and he's like, I'm starting a Spokane Riverkeeper. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Sounds great though. And it sounds like it would fit our thing. He said, when we announce it publicly, we'd like to come on your radio show and announce that we're starting this thing. And so then we obviously learn about like, okay, what does Spokane Riverkeeper mean? And then I learned about Waterkeeper Alliance and all these things. And so we had him
Huh.
on as a guest, he and the attorney who were starting it. We had him on as a guest, probably the first, like, to announce it, then pretty much all, like, as much as we could after that. And then we were covering a lot of the work that they were doing because it was all really cool river stuff.
Hmm.
And I don't know, maybe like 8 or 9 months into him having started that program, the Spokane Riverkeeper, he off air and off record and everything is like, I love doing this, but there's a lot to this work. I'm being asked to go talk to schools, to talk to the kids about river stuff. I'm getting calls by the media to answer questions. I have to go present at city council meetings. I have to write grants. I have to, all these things you got to do at a nonprofit. He's like, I really just want to sue people. I want to sue the polluters. I want to stop the pollution. I don't want to do all this stuff. And I kind of just, he left, it kind of was like confided in me. And I just took the chance. I said, I'd love to do it. Sounds like a great job. And so I went through the process. I had to apply to do it, and I go through interviewing, and I got picked. I got hired to do it. But it was really just because, like, I had learned about it from him being on the, interviewing him or him being on the show. And I'm like, I could do this. But again, like, I had no experience in nonprofit management or budgeting, or like the pieces you need for a lot of the pieces you need, or science or law or any of those things. But I just sort of pitched myself, and so I did. I kept the blog, I kept doing the blog and the radio show for a while, but then it did get a little complicated, because I also was then, like, we had a blog on our website for Spokane Riverkeeper, and we had our own social media channels and content that needed to be created. So I sort of phased out the writing, phased out the radio stuff, and was, fully committed to Spokane Riverkeeper. Still, and Paul, my partner, did it for probably 3 or 4 more years. And I would, then go on and be a guest on his show, and kind of full circle. But yeah, it was really, it just sort of, I want to say, like, fell into my lap, because I do think, like, at some point I did, work towards it, and, like, but it did kind of just work in that way, like, kind of fell into place.
Well, and so often, I mean, a lot of the things you were saying is about, like, the activities were sort of communication based or advocacy based, where you're, like, going to talk to people, educating people about these topics, like, having those skill sets. And I'm obviously biased because here we are on a podcast that I host, but, like, I do feel like that kind of ability to talk to different groups of people about these topics, and hopefully not make it feel like it's either, like, top down or, sort of guilting anyone or telling people what to do. Like, I feel like that's the stuff where people, especially in environment, like, just shut down, so it's kind of like it gets boring or it's not engaging. And, you having those skill sets, I feel like was probably, like, really what they needed, as someone to go in and talk about, rivers in a passionate way. Like, there you go. You might not have the nonprofit background, but sometimes that's good.
Yeah.
That's actually, like, a positive,
Right.
Yeah.
And I see it like, one of the things that I really resonate with today is, I've been, and we'll get maybe back into this, so, like, how this all, like, fits on the timeline, but, in my role at Waterkeeper Alliance, I know, and I've been working with all of these waterkeeper groups all around the world for 11 years now on staff. And, that's one of the things that I really appreciate most about the model that is Waterkeeper, the groups that do it, is that all of these waterkeepers around the world have such unique backgrounds. Like, they come at it from so many different ways, like, some people are very legal focused, or science focused, or communications focused, or policy focused, education, but whatever it may be, they sort of just, like, either do one of two things, or all of these things. They kind of fill in the rest of what they don't know with really good partnerships, or, if they're lucky and do good work, can fundraise and grow budgets and hire staff to do all that stuff, and, surround themselves with good people. But if everybody came into this work and, like, came into becoming a waterkeeper from the same background, like, went to law school, got a law degree, now we're doing this, like, it wouldn't be the same movement that it is, because it really does, there are people that have come out of different careers, former educators, former regulators in government, former whatever, communicators, and they come in and they start these waterkeeper groups, or come into these waterkeeper groups that exist, and just bring that different, a whole array of talents and skills to the work. And it's just, it's kind of cool. So yeah, the things that I was not good at, when I was Spokane Riverkeeper, that was all right. I found ways to get around that. Like I partnered with Gonzaga Law School. Like we had law
Yeah.
students, some of which I still talk to
Interesting.
today. Like, like
Wow.
I had law students like working constantly to do like legal research and write policy things to help. Or, yes, I had
Hmm.
some of the communication stuff down, but the fundraising thing, like we had staff or volunteers or a board or all those things. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of cool. Like,
Interesting.
yeah, all these cool stories that I have from like knowing these water keepers all around the world that have come at it from so many different ways.
Yeah.
That, and then like you have this network of hundreds of groups, but really like thousands to 10,000s of people who have like are on staff or in some way connected to these groups who all have different really cool things to bring to the table.
Yeah. I mean, especially as you said, there's so many different chapters in different parts of the world. Like it's cultural. There's, sort of probably even language components here too, or like how do people relate to rivers and water basins in different parts of the world? Like I'm fascinated by that. And I think you probably see a lot of that now at your role in water, the Waterkeeper Alliance, more like globally, it sounds
Yeah.
like. What was, yeah, so I'm curious, not to, I mean, like this, I know we could probably talk about your 6 years in Spokane for a very long time, or however many years it was, but like, what was I'm interested in like the difference between kind of that localized action and then you stepped into this role that's more overarching, more global or more network related. And of course, you're working on membership and bringing more folks in, it sounds like, which we can get to your current role. But like even before that, I'm curious just like what mindset shift that was, or how that process was going from such like a localized regional approach to then being on the Waterkeeper Alliance, like looking globally at water action.
Yeah, I instantly, like as soon as I got the title Spokane Riverkeeper and got into that job, I was like, and understood the model. And I keep referencing that, but like, just genuinely understanding what it means to be a water keeper or what the groups do and that, how they all do it locally in their own communities, all those things I already talked about. But I really instantly like got it and fell in love with like that idea, that approach to doing it, and I wanted to fill the gaps of like what I didn't know. And I didn't know a lot.
Yeah.
And so I knew that there was a network. I knew that I had peers out there who, as I was Spokane Riverkeeper, I could call up, email, whatever it may be, another water keeper somewhere else and say like, I saw on your website or your Instagram or whatever it may be that, like you're doing this. How did you do it? Like, I want to take what you're doing
Oh,
and bring
cool.
that to Spokane. And not everything's going to be, plug and play like that. But I wanted to, it was a very new program. The Spokane Riverkeeper was very new, and so it was moldable. It could grow into whatever that may be, whatever, and certainly, and I'd love to give a ton of praise to them later because they're still doing incredible work. But I
Yeah.
really wanted to I wanted to like take ideas that worked and implement them in Spokane, so that's why I just took to this idea that like, oh, there's a network out there. There are other water keepers out there. And I was a sponge, like constantly asking, annoying people again, probably like, how'd you do this? Or like, what
So
if it didn't work? Like, what did you learn from it so I can not make that same mistake? And
right.
so it only took me, I don't know, a couple of years. And one of the cool things that Waterkeeper Alliance does is back then we used to have do an annual conference. So all the water keepers from around the world would meet in person for like
Wow.
4 or 5 days and do like a big training conference or keynote speakers and networking things and sessions and panel sessions. It used to be every year. Now it's every other year. But I would go to those as Spokane Riverkeeper and I started to meet all these other people. And we're peers, we're colleagues kind of in a sense, but more peers
Yeah.
within the same network. So that networking is really strong. And I'm like, well, this is cool. Like, I love the model idea and I love Spokane. It wasn't my home, but like, it was the place I chose when I was 18, to
Yeah.
move out, to go to college.
Yeah.
And I chose to stay there after college. But I really wanted to get home. Like I wanted to get back to Montana. So
Yeah.
I knew a couple things had to happen. Like, well, one, I can't be the Spokane Riverkeeper in Montana. So like that, I need to have a different job.
Right.
But I wanted to be connected. I didn't want to leave the movement. I didn't want to leave that network, that crew that I had. And so, I mean, I planned, this is where like something that necessarily didn't fall into my lap, or I really did like kind of plant the seed and try to make happen, which is like I wanted to get a job at Waterkeeper Alliance. Like that
Yeah.
became a goal of mine because I knew
Hmm.
that I knew enough about like the model and the structure and what it was as being Spokane Riverkeeper. Well, why I'd love to go to Waterkeeper Alliance and like be able to work on all rivers and waterways around the world. Like, and I'd love to
Yeah.
do that from Montana. Like I want to have like
Yeah.
remote
The
jobs. So like,
ideal.
I'm just going
Yeah.
to create this thing. And, it just networking, an opportunity came up. There was a job opening at Waterkeeper Alliance. And I like being a waterkeeper does like you do have a lot of engagement with staff of Waterkeeper Alliance. So when I was Spokane
Yeah.
Riverkeeper, I was having tons of conversations with the then staff of Waterkeeper Alliance, some of which are
Right.
still my
Yeah.
coworkers now.
Nice.
But I thought if there's ever opportunity, like I'd love to be, think about it. And then people were always surprised, like, well, why would you want to leave? What you don't want to like people don't leave once they're a riverkeeper, a waterkeeper. They kind of just stay in those roles
Huh.
forever. And
Interesting.
I'm like,
Yeah.
well, like I had to kind of keep a little bit of the cards close to my chest. Like, well, I want to get back to Montana, and like if I can do this remotely, great. And it all just it honestly just like worked out quicker and better than I could have expected. There was an opportunity. I was able to like pitch myself to Waterkeeper Alliance. But opportunity and like ambition aside, like I really did. It's really because like I liked the structure and the model of what Waterkeeper
Mm-hmm.
Alliance did, how it worked to support all of these waterkeeper groups. I'd go to these conferences and events and just be like fascinated by the stories of,
Hmm.
the waterkeepers from Africa and Australia and Latin America, like all these cool stories they're telling about like the work that they were doing. I'm like, that's unbelievable. Like I want to know more
Wow.
about that. And so, I wanted that. I really wanted to have a chance to do that. And so that's how I took that mindset of, or I'm just going to be so hyper local focused on Spokane, and, want to do something bigger with that. And it helped that, it helped that I wasn't like Spokane wasn't my home. So like, I didn't feel like I was abandoning like my home waters,
Right. Right.
like,
Right.
well, I can get
Right.
back to Montana and,
Yeah.
do the things I want to do in Montana and still have this really cool job. And it worked out that way.
Totally.
It doesn't always,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
it
that's
certainly did in
awesome.
my.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Well, and I'm curious too. So now, I mean, you've been in this role that you got then. You've been in this role for many years, sounds like. And I'm now you're sort of sitting at that level of, you just mentioned all these awesome different regions of the world that also work on water issues and water stewardship, water access, clean water, etc. I'm curious to hear just like more about your current job and like what you support the network with and what membership kind of means to you, and how that relates to like whether it's network support or policy creation. Like I keep thinking like, wow, you really oversee a network of climate and or environment and or water actors. I shouldn't put quotes around water because that's literally what it is, but like activists, activators, change makers in so many parts of the world. How does that manifest in your current role, and has that I imagine your job has changed over time, but maybe I shouldn't make that assumption. But yeah, like talk more about your current role and what it, again, kind of that shift from like being very locally based to like now you just oversee, you're part of a network that oversees a ton of different waterkeeper, riverkeeper groups around the world. I'm probably using the wrong words there.
No,
Riverkeeper, I
you're
guess,
right.
is better.
You got
Okay,
it.
okay.
Um,
Keepers, I should say.
so I can't wait to talk about it. And I want to come back to, because like as you set that up, you were making that sort of just a nexus between climate and water, like, because it's
Yeah,
something that I want to talk to you about or like engage with
please.
you on, because this is I
Yes.
know knowing the topic of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to talk about like I will talk first about like Waterkeeper Alliance. So it's sort of like my role. Yes, my role has changed a lot, but I've ever since I joined staff to where I am now, I've always been in some sort of capacity, some role where like I'm I guess on the front lines of the groups, on the front lines. Like I'm just the phone call away or the email away from our waterkeeper groups. Like whenever they have questions or concerns or support that they need, like I've been in a position to sort of field that and then triage like what that looks like. So we have a
Got it.
staff. We're not huge. We have a staff of about like 28 people at Waterkeeper Alliance staff. We have, we're a 501c3, so we have an operations team, a development team, a communications team, a legal team, an advocacy team, like the things that Waterkeeper Alliance does. We have a mission. We have our, our own goals and vision as an organization. One of those happens to be a big one is existing for the Waterkeeper groups. groups. Like we exist because
Hmm.
they exist. We exist to
Yeah.
support them, but we drive things on our end. And like we have our own fundraising to do to keep our lights on, to keep our support flowing to waterkeeper groups. We have our own communication strategy so we can communicate about the effectiveness of Waterkeeper Alliance. We
Hmm.
have our own legal team because we take on cases ourselves. We often go work on cases with waterkeeper groups, but we are challenging things. Certainly in the U.S. at the federal level with the Clean Water Act, we're challenging things. Like we have our own legal cases, and then we have our own advocacy campaigns. The idea being, like if we're doing advocacy at Waterkeeper Alliance, we have 3 campaigns. One is kind of just like this catch-all bucket clean water defense, so it's like all the big, it can kind of catch a lot of things. Then 2 very specific campaigns: one on animal agriculture operations and their impacts to water, and one on
Wow.
climate and energy projects. And so like it's a
Hmm.
lot of the fossil fuel fight projects. But we have
Hmm.
advocacy campaigns so we can bucket and kind of bring waterkeepers under those campaigns. But then again, like the existence of Waterkeeper Alliance is because of the waterkeeper groups on the ground and needing to support those. And that's what I do.
Yeah.
So I've always been in
Cool.
some role or some fashion to hear what waterkeepers are working on and to activate and work with them. A lot of what I've done, and this is the really boring kind of like unsexy stuff, but is like I wanted to build structure because we're
Yeah.
it's hard having all of our waterkeeper groups are members. We're not unique in that like we're a membership organization. There are lots of people that probably have my job who are servicing members in some way, and a hell of a lot more than 300. But like we have 300 very passionate, opinionated groups who are operating and doing really important work. They all have a million needs and wants, and we can never have enough resources to do all of that for
Yeah.
them. However,
Yeah.
like one of the things that we didn't have when I started on staff, or I had but certainly needed to be improved, was just some like general foundational structure of like who are
Hmm.
these groups, like what kind of, where do they are they located, like basic information about like who's on staff of these groups, like what are their skill sets, what are their needs, what issues are they working on. So just being able to bring things into a database to say like, well, we have X number of groups around the world who are working on stormwater pollution, or these
Hmm.
groups have a staff between like 5 and 10 people. Their budget sizes are like in this range, just so you can kind of start to visualize in a data sense, like who the groups are, where they're at, what their needs are, how they operate. So we can start offering things that can, be the most benefit for the most amount of groups. And so a lot of that structural stuff, all
Yeah.
while like constantly taking in information from them and like figuring out what to do with it. And then also submitting, sending information back out to them. Like we, as like an organization in and of ourselves, like we have a lot of partners and ally groups who are constantly coming to us saying, we want to sue this thing, or we want to try to stop this, or we want to try to pass a bill on this, or fight this bill, or we need to stop this offshore oil drilling in Senegal. Like, who are the waterkeeper groups there? So like we're
Wow.
constantly getting from outside sources like we want to connect with, because they know that Waterkeeper Alliance has groups on the ground. So like we can make those connections. So
Yeah.
it's just a lot of this like liaisoning between what Waterkeeper Alliance is doing out to the waterkeeper groups, what they're doing up to us, and how we can like manage that and like figure that out, and just and then trying to find ways, and gosh, probably a million things, but like really trying to find ways to make the waterkeepers work a little bit easier. Try to add capacity in
Yeah.
any way that we can. If, in capacity to most groups would mean like provide them funding. I wish we could do that. I wish we had unlimited
Hmm.
money and could
Hmm.
support them all financially. But we can do things like, we've negotiated with Esri, which is a great, GIS mapping software, to get
Hmm.
every waterkeeper group has free subscription access to use Esri mapping technology
Wow.
to better advocate and like better communicate the work that they're doing. Finding
Hmm.
discounts on water quality monitoring equipment, or, legal research resources, and just like any of these kind of like benefits, tools, things, even like the little things like discounts on gloves for all of them that are doing cleanup events, so like for
Yeah.
volunteers, like any little shortcut, like tip and trick and hack that we can help like put in the hands of waterkeeper groups to help them be more effective. We're
Hmm.
constantly doing that. And so I work on I have a team of 3, me and 2 others, who work in this department, who are just, we're trying to find ways to effectively and efficiently support all of these groups. meaning, like we have to say I don't know or no a lot, because they're, it's to the waterkeeper group's credit, they come up with some wild things that they want or need.
Sure.
And it's like, I'm an emotional person, and like it really, like
Mm,
it pulls at you all the time, like, oh, I want to help so
yeah,
much, but like we can't, or
totally.
like, yes, maybe, but just, using the network. And if any water keepers end up listening to this, they'll have heard me said this a million times. Like, one of my main answers I give most of the day, all day long, is like, have you asked the other water keepers yet? Because like we have, we operate
Mm,
and manage listservs of all these people around the world, and it, whether they're like everybody or like we have it broken out like into regions or segments or states or issues or topics. We have all these like dozens and dozens of listservs. So I always just tell water keepers, because they'll ask me like, I need help trying to develop a
yeah.
monitoring program for bacteria. I'm like, yes, like I could help you, because like, but also like you should just ask the listserv, like say who else has done this, because then
Yeah.
I mean it's a shortcut for me, but also it's like the best thing to do, because then they'll have like the scientists from the respective organizations will be jumping on the listserv and say, yes, you should
Right.
do this and this.
Right.
And then like,
Yeah.
finally, like more
Interesting.
nerdy things is like we keep this like very big repository of documents and resources. Like it's basically like a giant
Hmm.
Google Drive like thing, where all of these documents, like sample press releases, job descriptions for various titles of things, and governance
Hmm.
documents and policy documents. We just keep all these things that water keepers have sent us over the years, and like that becomes its own repository of like people saying like, just searching keywords, like I need to know about communications best practices. Well, there's probably a white paper or something on that resource library. So just thinking of ways to like
Yeah. Mm,
bring the water keepers together.
yeah, totally. It's interesting to like direct to the listserv, just kind of putting it. I'm on all these group chats and some Slack groups and stuff like that. And it's true. It's like, maybe I ignore the message if I don't know anything about it, but someone's going to jump on and say, I know exactly how you should do that. And I'll tell
Yeah.
you how, like these are the best practices. Well, and it's also really cool because I feel like when Brennan kind of introduced you as a person to me, like as a guest, he was like, but if, Bart's a really busy guy, he gets a ton of inbounds. He's like, he gets so many emails. So like, don't worry if he doesn't get back to you. Like you could even call him or something. And you like wrote right back, which I was like, damn, you probably do get a lot of emails. So I'm glad it cut through, but I'm sure it's it's like air traffic control that you're doing.
Yeah.
You're really like fielding tons of that. I
Great
feel.
way to put it.
Yeah.
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 But I do like, I've, because, again, like I didn't know this about myself, and I really only have known this, or like kind of crystallized in my mind about myself in the last couple of years, which is like, I kind of have a skill set of like being able to just triage all this information.
Yeah.
Um, so like I can take in tons of emails or calls, and like, I mean, it's chaotic to everybody else. And like, I promise to like whoever comes after me, like in this position or at Waterkeeper Alliance, like somehow I'll get this all written down. But like, like I do really
Yeah.
like, I do think it's really important to like, I just don't, I have notes, so sticky notes, digital notes, like, but we have like really good systems and processes, which is all really nerdy
Yeah.
stuff. But like using Slack
You
and
got it.
like project
Yeah.
management systems, and like everything is written somewhere, and like a reminder set somehow, and it just like it kind of works. But it, a lot of this is it comes down to, and like when I first started at Waterkeeper Alliance, I was still like very much in the like the I'm a environmentalist, I'm an advocate, I'm an activist, like I'm doing all this stuff, and I still am. Like that'll never go away. But I have really found like my footing in being like behind the scenes, really nerdy, like data, like we're doing a gap analysis of like, ooh, we have all these water keepers that are not working on this. I wonder why, or like these groups not tracking this, or they are all, this is a new thing they're all tracking. I wonder if that's something we should be learning more about. And it's just that it really helps to have like just all this input gets into somewhere, and like you can kind of make sense of it, like just analyze all this input we're gathering. And it really helps, like it helps the water keepers, like, because again, like
exactly,
so much of like a lot of it's in my brain, and everyone on staff at Waterkeeper Alliance, we all have all this like crazy knowledge in our brains about like what all the waterkeeper groups are doing. But over the last 5, 6 or so years at Waterkeeper Alliance, like we've really made a push internally to like digitize things like in a database. So like we're not always all going to be here forever, and like these things have to be out of our brains, like on paper. It just helps everything run so much more smooth.
Totally, especially with that many groups that you're looking after. Okay, I'm going to do a time check because I have like a couple more topics I want to talk to you about. One, I want to talk to you about the thing that you wanted to engage on, which was climate. So more of the climate focus
Yeah.
there. I can hand it to you and we can go there. The other thing I want to talk about is kind of the pulling in outdoor recreation. So you
Yeah.
mentioned like you are a paddler or you're passionate about that area, outdoor recreator. I'm so curious kind of like what the connection point there is, obviously, because that's really the thesis of the podcast is like those that like to spend time outside in nature also want to protect it. So we can do that. And then I have my last question that I ask everybody, which I'll wait for that one. But those are kind of the two big areas, I guess, before we wrap. And we can do either one first, or maybe they all connect. I don't know, but curious where you want to go next. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, well, I hope I didn't like oversell like my climate knowledge and
No, no,
expertise
no.
in saying I want to talk about, but it's something I really fast. What I'm really fascinated in is, like, so we have a campaign at Waterkeeper Alliance. Like we talk focus on climate. We constantly are talking about like our work as climate work. And in my experience talking with waterkeeper groups, I know that they're doing work that is climate work, like climate change, water, like it's totally inseparable. I'm just like speaking aloud, almost asking the question back to you at some point, which is like, I hear of all this work. I follow all this work that our waterkeeper groups are doing. And if I were to ask them, like, do you consider your work climate change work? I'm not sure that like, I don't know. I don't think as many as you would think would like immediately tie their work climate change work. But it's just, I find this a very fascinating struggle internally that we have, which is I can see climate in like everything that we do at Waterkeeper Alliance and that everything that the waterkeeper groups do. I mean, like droughts, like shrinking rivers, like the heavier storms and flooding events and infrastructure that's like overwhelmed, which then causes sewage to leak into waterways. And, you know, the water's warming, which is causing like algal blooms and all these ecosystems are like everything that waterkeeper groups do, like ties back to climate. It's just been this really interesting, I don't even want to call it like an internal struggle because maybe it's just me. I'm just always like thinking like, how come our waterkeepers don't consider, and this, I don't want to generalize too much, but like consider themselves like on the front lines of climate as much as they actually really truly are. So anyway,
Interesting.
I guess I'm kind of curious in your take a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I started this whole project kind of because of this, and go with me here. I'll explain what I mean. Like I had so many conversations with people. This is like adjacent to what you just said, but I had so many conversations with people where they were like, oh, but yeah, I don't know that much about climate. Like, I'm not like, you know, what's the word? Like credentialed to talk about it or something. If people felt it was like this like exclusive academia laden topic that people didn't want to touch if they didn't have a degree or something. And I'm kind of being, you know, I'm definitely generalizing and I'm also being a little dramatic when I describe this, but the amount of conversations I had with people who were like, you know, oh yeah, I don't really know enough about it, but I care a lot about our earth and I love to be outside recreating, but you know, I don't want to touch the like climate so sort of specific. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, I want to open up the aperture on what this topic is, right? Climate, I always say kind of in the same sentence as you've heard me say this conversation, like climate or environment, like just sort of what's changing, what's happening to our planet as we speak, like how can we kind of mitigate or adapt or build resilience, however you want to put it to that. And, you know, to me, yeah, water is inextricably linked to this topic. And so I think like it's interesting just maybe even in the wording of it, like you know, to your point, if people maybe would be like, oh, I don't, you know, that's not what I work on. I work on water or I work on environmental issues, environmental conservation, but I don't really work on climate. And to your point, it's like all interconnected, I think. And I think it's great to de-jargonize or whatever you want to call it, like make it just more accessible. That's like what I wanted to do with this whole thing is, and Brennan came to these events we have where we just get people together. We have like runners, walkers, we have speakers that kind of speak. It's like the anti-panel is kind of how we frame it. And the whole idea is just to be like, let's get outside together. We'll hear from speakers, but they're not like on a pedestal on a stage with a spotlight. You know, they're like, they literally walk among us kind of thing. So I think, I mean, I didn't really answer your question or, you know, the like posing it back to me, but I do think there's this interesting title or like people either take it on or don't, as like I even today went to a gathering where, you know, there was sort of a climate theme and they're like, oh, do you work in climate? And some people around the table were like, oh no, like this one guy who's like a student studying all this cool stuff, he was like, no, I don't work on climate. And it's so wild to me that almost the identity piece around it, because I'm like, we all we all like have to, almost like we all
Right.
have to work on climate. Like we have no choice. Like, and certainly I would argue, or whatever the word is, I would encourage the network that you are talking about are definitely all folks working on these topics, like whatever you want to name it, right? It's sort of
Yeah.
all in there together. And yeah, so there's like two parts there. There's sort of the like exclusivity of the word climate or that topic, but then there's also this kind of like inextricably linked, like all a Venn diagram, everything's connected component to water, climate, energy, nature, all these pieces. So I don't
Right.
know. I'm very much in that camp for sure.
Yeah. I guess, reflecting a little bit on that is, like it is, I get it. It's like totally massive and abstract, like climate change, right?
Yeah,
But like,
totally.
it's maybe this is, I'm segueing us right into, like, I mean, I think like the local water issues are, I know they're part of it. Like, I know they're connected, and the benefit there being like they are a little more immediate and tangible and solvable, maybe. And so I guess that's, like to the recreation point. I mean, I wouldn't be in this work if it weren't for like loving being in the outdoors, like growing up
Yeah.
rafting or floating the rivers and skiing and all those things. And so I know it's easier said than done, but like just like noticing the places that you love a lot and like talking about what's happening to them and like understanding like what's going on there and finding the people that also like love those places and are doing work. Like, I mean, that's something that like my recreation background or any recreation background, it could happen to me. And I think that's like what waterkeepers do every day too, is like they want to be like the place where these like conversations are starting. And so for me, like spending time on the water, whatever that may be, is so like so critical. Like it just builds that connection. And I think
Yeah.
I think with that connection to like being around the water, like everyone should take on a little bit of like responsibility. And
Yeah.
just like even like the little bit of responsibility. So like I'll kind of talk more about like river rafting or like floating because that's my thing. But like just like the everyday like little choices that boaters and recreators make, like how you dispose of like your waste on a multi-day trip, or like where you launch the boats and what things you
Mm-hmm.
trample on and you're getting boats in and out of the water, and like where you rinse the gear that you have, and like all
Hmm.
these little things like add up. So I mean, like I know recreators by nature always get like put in the bucket of like, well, yes, if you recreate outside, you're probably an environmentalist, you're probably a conservationist, and that's true. Like, or I mean, I get that, but like there's more than just being outside. Like you have to be like really present outside. And so like I'll
Yeah.
always remember like this one water keeper who used to always just use this phrase. He's like, if he was presented a like a challenging idea or a question, like instead of immediately reacting, he would always say like, well, I'm gonna go back to the river and I'm gonna listen to the river and what the river says, and then I'll know what to do. And
Mm.
that's he was right. He is right. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like just grounding yourself in nature and like being outside, like if you're really in tune with where you're at outside, like you're you're going to want to protect those places, like you protect the places you love.
Yeah.
That's obviously very basic. But if you like really listen deeply to like what those places are saying and what they need, like they speak, they show
Mm.
signs, like there are ways to get and interpret what is needed in those places that you love. So I think
Yeah.
that sort of like connection piece is great. Like it's the first thing people should do, but like I think it should be deepened a lot more. Like be in those
Yeah.
places, like go skiing, go hiking, go running, like all those things that people do, like do them and do them deeply, like really get into
Mm-hmm.
them. And then you can kind of
Yeah.
see yourself in those places and like, what needs to happen.
Yeah. And to your point, like what happens maybe when the etiquette around rinsing gear or putting in at a certain location, like those kinds of things, you can also start to see what happens when, maybe the detriments to some kinds of recreation
Yeah.
or use of the outdoors, I guess, in certain ways. That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely, it's interesting because the woman I just had on the podcast, like we just launched an episode with a woman from Trust for Public Land. She's focused on like almost well, I think they go hand in hand, but a very different topic maybe of like urban forestry and parks access and stuff. And we just talked about this idea that I always like reference the study, which I think at this point there's multiple studies, but the just idea that like if you don't have that connection to nature, like it's like, what, like let's talk about access. What does it mean to get that connection in the first place if that's not there, or that access to, green spaces, if that's not there, maybe the same level of like wanting to protect a place isn't there. So it's interesting to like go from what her and I were talking about to then also like sort of because I feel like I always speak to these communities of outdoor recreators, but it's not a given that people can access those spaces. And that's like a whole other topic. And so I think it's also really interesting then to be like, and then once we get people into it, like, how do we deepen it? How do we deepen the knowledge around what maybe the sport is, or how to the like how to's of certain knowledge sharing. But then also like the etiquette around recreation. And I feel like I'm definitely simplifying what you just said. I love what you said about like deepening it and like really listening to nature. And there is something interesting about that, like, what's the word? Not ladder or like path. Yeah, pathway into that for folks who like have never been on the water in their lives. And then they suddenly get a chance to go paddling. It's like, wow, that's a kind of another really interesting inroad to, I think, caring about this topic. So yeah, it's cool.
Well, and to one of your last point, yes, absolutely. And one of your last points there, you said about like the access.
Yeah,
I'll make a plug. It's not mine or anyone I know, but this book
please.
I read recently, Billionaire Wilderness, like Justin Farrell
Yeah,
and Jason
I have
Farrell.
heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, it takes place in
Hmm.
like a lot of it is a case study on Montana, Wyoming mostly, but then Montana.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Um, and again, like that, the access piece, like the justice piece of all of this, because what's happening, and I'm not the expert, and I will not pretend to be, but like generally what's happening in this country and the world is like
Yeah.
the outdoor space is becoming a commodity. It's becoming
Yeah.
the access piece is really shrinking, and like
Yeah.
what that's doing for like dynamics overall. Because like for a lot of people, like caring about the environment or like having conservation ethics,
Mm-hmm.
isn't just like having them. It's like to practice those is becoming, harder and harder to do, or phased out by like the
Yeah.
amount of people with a lot of access and a lot of money, billionaires, right? Of
Yeah.
like making these spaces more private and more exclusive. And like this idea that like, so
Yep.
it's very privileged position for me to say like, well, I go outside into the outdoors because like it makes me feel good and like I feel connected and it's like
Yeah.
therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yes, but like there's a lot of people that can't do that or don't have the access to that, and
Right.
that access is shrinking more and more, and that is hard because like if we really want people to go outside and connect with these places, but they're not able to
Yeah.
do that, like they're
Right.
unable to do that, or the access is limited, then we're not growing a next generation of conservationists and
Exactly.
environmentalists. That's really
Exactly.
challenging.
Yeah. And also something that I need to clarify from my point, my like things that I've said both on this episode and other episodes. It's definitely not that you like need to have access to be a conservationist or an environmentalist. Like
Sure.
certainly people can absolutely be environmentalists in urban areas and cities, and that's amazing. Like there's like plenty of those people. I feel like a lot of my like environmentalist friends are like in New York City, which actually is quite a green city if you look at it. But that point you just made too is absolutely real. Like there's there's an access component, because there's also the like physical benefits, mental benefits of that. Like a conservation feelings aside, there's sort of that that as you said, like the access is getting cut off, and with it those benefits that people are able to feel from being out in nature. And and anyway, so I think, I mean, we could talk forever about that topic. And I think the piece that you said though of like it's really making me think. I love what you said about continuing to deepen that relationship, because it is sort of at the base level. You're like, yeah, folks that kind of like to recreate outside, you'd assume maybe they also are environmentalists or whatnot. But what does it mean? Like what kind of recreation, but also what like depth of recreation, or kind of that like relationship building. And I'm sure certainly there's no one right way or wrong way
Sure.
to be in nature, but I think that's really interesting. I love what you said about listening to the river, or listening to like being really in tune with natural spaces. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool. Okay. I'm going to ask as our last question, and then we're going to wrap because I've been with you for an hour, which thank you so much, Bart, for spending this much time. I have a feeling, like, as you said, we're both storytellers. I'm like, oh, yeah, we could talk for so long.
For sure.
Okay, so my last question I ask folks is the wrap up is sort of, what is your favorite climate solution? What is I should amend this. What is a favorite climate solution of yours that is not your own? Because we've just spent a lot of time talking about Waterkeeper Alliance and Riverkeeper groups and water in general. Is there a climate solution that you're excited about, or an environmental solution, environmental advancement that you want to mention here for folks that, it's always kind of a fun sharing session at the end where it's like, people are like, oh, I'd never heard of, this specific carbon capture or whatever, like it's sort of an interesting new sharing time. So that's the question to you. The last question is a climate solution that's catching your attention.
Well, I've been long like fascinated by this concept of, like, okay, the earth was just fine without us as people, and it probably could be, but this whole like natural systems, like nature-based solution, like returning the systems to what they were before, and like having these natural systems, working with them as opposed to working against them. And so I'm gonna, be that person, and like I'm still going to talk about water because I'm a water nerd, but just generally, like things like, restoring wetlands or floodplains areas, or like, I'll focus on one specifically, which is like oyster restoration, like these oysters, these like natural filters of water, and like the cool thing that oysters have done for forever. Like these groups that are doing this in Hawaii and Texas and New York City, like restoring these oysters, like all these like nature-based solution things, which again is like using nature. It's this biomimicry of like, this is how, like, we don't need to create systems and to create technology to like get these results. Like nature has done this for a really long time, and these have so many benefits, like, they're like easily reducing flooding and, like removing pollutants and absorbing carbon, which is all great, but like they're also going beyond that, beyond the environmental thing. In my experience, at least, like, these are people driven projects. Like they require people and community. So they're, sure, you could replicate and like monetize probably some of these solutions and so that are happening. Like in all these instances that I know of, like these are real people in real communities who are like, ooh, I like this idea of like taking oysters and like repopulating oysters in South Carolina to filter the water and clean water. And but they're all like, there are opportunities for like communities to learn, like the people to learn more about about nature, about watersheds, about like what these solutions are. They're all measurable, like they have tons of climate benefits, they're long lasting. I mean, it's just like bringing it back to like what works, and like before we started messing with things. And all of those nature-based solutions are just fascinating. They're so like simple but not like, they're so complex, and like, because nature is complex, but
it is.
Going back to nature.
Yeah, I love that. And it also very well like touches on what we just talked about with, I think obviously to your point of like, nature was fine without us. Yes. And a lot of environmental solutions out there do seem to be really focused on like, like we talk a lot about language sometimes too, like keeping it pristine and, sort of protected and separate. And it's like, well, wait a minute, we're not talking about people and communities in this conversation. And if we don't talk about people and communities, like we kind of can't have a solution right now with the way the world is, like we can't really ignore the folks who are either most impacted or also like who are stewarding landscapes and, oyster projects and like relationships with certain nature. So I really appreciate that, because it's like, as you said, the natural climate solution piece, but it's also centering around how can humans be a part of the solution instead of, I don't know. And that I always say that. I'm like, well, is that too like pie in the sky? But I believe we can be if we change. Yeah, I like it too. So, but Bart, thank you so much for being on. This was really, really fun I feel like we got to know each other because we hadn't met. So we like got to know each other on this conversation, and that was a really fun treat for me. So thanks for sharing everything you did around your career and all the work you do. And I'm very grateful to Brennan for putting us in touch.
I am very grateful for Brennan too. And thank you. I mean, thank you for what you're doing. for giving
Yeah.
like a space for people to share their stories and to have these conversations. I mean, it's not a given like that these conversations happen without some thought and intention behind it. And so, you making the space and people like you making the space in this arena that are doing this. So thank you for the opportunity. And
Thanks.
I mean, all I get to do is talk about, and like I love talking about what the water keepers do. Like really, like all of their
Yeah.
victories, they're not my victories. They're there, like, but like to play any small part, like, just some of like the coolest, scrappiest, most like relentless, creative defenders I've ever met in my life, like out there doing this incredible work.
So
Like they wake
cool.
up every day to like and choose this. Like they choose to do this. They choose to fight. So being able to speak about them, I could do it for hours. So thank you for letting me share their stories as well.
Absolutely. I can tell you could speak for hours and I love it. And we'll definitely link out to a bunch of the work you mentioned, the book you mentioned, even maybe specific waterkeeper stories that you want to highlight in the show notes kind of thing. Like happy to do that
Cool.
as
Yeah, I'd
well.
love
And
to.
I'm excited to continue to deepen my knowledge about waterkeeper work too. So thank you. And yeah, I'm glad we're in touch now. This is awesome. Thanks so much for
Likewise.
being on.
Yeah, thank you so much.